Hey everybody, welcome back to another great episode. We're starting season 3, episode 1, and I have another great guest with you, Army veteran, Mindful Memorial Foundation founder, and a veteran of Iraq, our buddy Ben. And Ben was injured in an IED explosion on New Year's Eve in 2006. And when he got home, he started to find challenges with his ability to sleep and other agitations. And he started connecting with yoga and mindfulness practice. And he discovered the tools that he could use to be present, to calm his heart and mind, and get some sleep. So we just want to welcome Ben King. Ben, welcome to the Red, White, and You show. How are you?
I'm good, Dean. I'm proud to be here. Thank you.
Oh, well, thanks for being on. Thanks for taking time. So obviously we got your great bio here, but share with us a little bit who Ben King is and how you came, how Mindful or the Mindful Memorial Foundation came to be, but how you even got into mindfulness. How did you even get into meditation?
Sure. Well, so I was born and raised in Richmond, Virginia. Very fortunate. Lived a life of predictability, and love and relationship to God and country that felt very grounded and supported. And my family was hit by a traumatic event when I was 10. Just out of the blue, just a freak accident took the life of my little brother. And at that moment, everything, it was literally a moment. Everything changed. And this big hole in what I had up to that moment experienced as a very predictable, stable, loving life, this big hole opened up. And when this big black hole opened up, I didn't know what to fill it with, and my first reaction was really anger, and I became very angry, and I particularly became angry at God, and I didn't understand how something like this could happen to a family that went to church every Sunday, gave to the poor. It's like God's a transactional relationship, right? I do this, you give me that, right? So anyway. I became very lost, and so the way I looked to find my ground again was to become what I thought was kind of a warrior who could never feel so defeated and low and awful ever again. And, I say this from, 30 years removed. So when this was going on, I didn't understand what was going on. I was simply a lost kid trying to find direction. And this is 1990, right? And so, I remember 1990 as kind of the time when, movies and kind of TV and the ability to see these other ways of imagining how to be kind of really started to become a big deal. And so I looked to Hollywood to determine how I could possibly become this, impervious warrior, right? And so I followed all the kind of the masculine ideals, as it were, and wanted to be like, I wanted to be like Bruce Willis. I wanted to be like Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I wanted to be like James Bond. Watching in those movies, right, where you don't show emotion, you don't interact with your feelings, you just get the job done. And if you can get the job done and do it well, then the dream awaits, right? Like if you become this warrior, that's what you get at the end, right? You get the girl and you ride off into the sunset. And so I followed that track as best as I could, starting with Boy Scouts, became an Eagle Scout. Football, became the captain of the football team. Joined a fraternity, tried to live this imaginary ideal. And what happened was when September 11th struck, it made perfect sense to me that this was a perfect opportunity to go to war and further prove myself, because I kept running into this fundamental problem. Every time I'd achieve something, I got an Eagle Scout. Eh, got to do something better than that. Captain of the football team. Now, got to do something better than that. Well, what's the got to do something better than that? What's the top level of that? Well, go to war, right? Go to war, be honored by your country for going to war. So, in my mind, this made a whole lot of sense. I'd always had fascination with the military. Both my grandfather served in World War II. And so, this really connected for me mind, body, and spirit. I was like, all right, if I do this, then finally I will get to this place where I won't be vulnerable again. So, went to war, prepared for war, went to war, experienced, a lot of incredible things. Probably the most incredible thing was getting blown up on New Year's Eve, almost losing, almost losing my manhood, so to speak. I went to war to become a man, right? And then the IED almost took that away. I got direct hit by an IED, and the biggest problem was that the steering column got blown into my groin. So they were very worried that area of the body was not going to be fully operational. So I got medevaced out and packed on ice, and everybody and their mother got to look at me in all my glory, packed in ice. that was that was a little bit tricky, but ultimately it turned out okay. Everything's fine, tried and true. I've got 2 great kids now. Everything's great. Anyway, I come back from the war in Iraq, and this was during the surge, so we were getting a lot of credit for being in the war during the toughest time. So I got home, and people really gave me a lot of respect, and I felt really good. And I thought, truly, man, I really did think I'd achieved my goal of reaching this pinnacle of warriorship, of citizenship, of masculinity, of maleness, of whatever you want to call it. I thought I'd reached it. Not only did I reach it, I had this little purple heart that said, I'm allowed in any conversation, anywhere. You show me a warrior, and I'll show you this medal, and I can go talk to them as equals. So I figured, what could possibly be the thing or the challenge that I couldn't meet? I bested war, right? I got a direct hit from an IED, and I'm still here. Well, that narrative that I had subscribed to fell apart in a dramatic way 6 months after I came home, and I couldn't keep up. Like I couldn't handle the stressors. I couldn't handle the uncertainty, and the fear of vulnerability was no longer like a civilian version of it, right? For civilians, I kind of characterize life as a civilian. It's a scale from 1 to 16. You go to war, you still have 1 to 16, but you add 4. So now it's 1 to 20. A warrior's life experience includes the spectrum between 1 and 20. Civilians 1 and 16. So when this extra 4 notches, right, of intensity showed up in my civilian life, I tried to handle it with the rules and the tools that the military had given me. But they didn't work in the civilian world. And I really struggled. And I struggled mind, body, and spirit. So my story fell apart. My hopes and dreams that I would achieve this goal fell apart. My body started to fall apart. I stopped sleeping. When that happened, all my systems went out of whack. I was constantly having really strange relationships with my emotions. I get triggered in certain ways, and I would just see the world differently. If you've ever taken any drugs, you might experience this in the day after, right? If you've ever taken any kind of harder drugs, I did that in college. Now I'll never do it again, because the day after, I always felt like the world was tilted, like there was just this offness, the shadows, the sun, everything was off. Well, that showed up without drugs at all. It was just like a trigger. And all of a sudden, I had these experiences of what I called slam sounds. The sounds of people talking would be different. I'd perceive things that weren't there. It really jarred me. And so physically, everything changed. And then spiritually, everything just really fell apart. And to the point where I started listening to the demons, and started thinking, oh, maybe that idea of, just finishing it off and being done with it all is the right course of action. So the very worst version of myself, making claims about, eternity and peace, at the point of a gun. And so those three things, just ultimately led me to a place of just desperation. And I started to climb out of that hole about 3 years later, with just a yoga class that I just happened to fall into at the gym. And I had studied CrossFit before CrossFit became cool. Back in the day, there was the CrossFit website was just like just some black and white, and it's just the workout of the day. And everyone was like, "Hey, go do the WOD." Well, now everybody does CrossFit, but did that and came home and I tried to do it again, and my body just wasn't up for it. So I tried yoga, and yoga just felt good. And so when that happened, I started to see things beyond what I had perceived, and it was that kind of sped up the process of looking at other ways of managing my mind and my body. And that's how I ultimately came to find mindfulness at a class at the VA. And it was through that class that I learned about mindfulness. I learned it wasn't so woo woo, and I really started to take control. And so I know I said a whole lot there. And so right before we go into where Mindful Memorial Day came, maybe I'll pause and kind of see where we are.
Sure. No, that's great, and um, I love it because what you don't know is obviously today we're doing pre-recording, but the individual right before you was about mindfulness. You just said something about that it wasn't, you come to understand that it wasn't so woo woo. And I had this conversation with the previous guest of what was your initial understanding of meditation and mindfulness? Was, you called it woo woo, but what was your real thought of, like, the VA wants me to do what? Or, what was it?
So after I had tried the yoga experience, I just experienced pleasant feelings in my body. And the no pain, no gain world that I was used to didn't really allow for pleasurable experiences with the body except under particular contexts. And so to experience this enjoyable feeling with yoga was an eye-opening experience. And I kept doing that. And then I actually ran into a friend of mine who I hadn't seen in a long time. And she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I got back from Iraq, and I've decided to start this blog, and it's called Armor Down. And I just wanted to talk about ways of transitioning, et cetera, et cetera." And she said, "Well, have you ever considered mindfulness meditation?" And I said, "Well, not really. I've heard about it, but I don't really know much about it." And she's like, "Well, look, they're teaching it at the VA. Because you're a veteran, you should just try it." And I said, "Okay, sure." So she said, "I'll connect you with the teacher, and you could go and do it. I think it's Tuesdays and Thursdays." So I said, "Okay." So I got a call from the teacher that night, and she was like, "Hey, just come in on Thursday." So I went into the VA to this little room, and sat down next to a bunch of vets. I mean, there's probably about 6 vets in there. And I sat down next to a Vietnam vet, and I said, "What's this like?" And he's like, "Well, you ain't awake and you ain't asleep." And I was like, "Okay."
I love it.
And so I said, "All right." So I sat down, not really knowing what to expect. And what started out was something I was familiar with, which was just like just paying attention to your breathing. And so we listened to a 5-minute guided kind of focus on your breathing practice. And then the teacher proceeded to simply say, "Okay, now what I want you to do is I just want you to use your attention and your awareness to follow where I guide you." And I was like, "Okay, that's pretty easy." And she's like, "Now I want you to just pay attention and just listen." So I said, "Okay." So she's like, "All right, now notice your right thumb. Notice your right pointer finger. And then she just went along calling out these parts of my body. And about 15 minutes in, I felt very clearly a feeling of going into a kind of a quieter, almost dream-like state where it's like, when you're about to take a nap, or I often remember, I don't know if you remember basic training, but I remember basic training at Fort Benning. And the only time of basic training that was really like pleasurable was the moment right before you got to go to sleep. Like, you get on the rack, you know that you don't have fire guard until like 4 a.m., right? So you're like, I can get 4 solid hours here. And it's like you lay down and everything kind of slows down. And right before you go into unconsciousness and fall asleep, there's just this like, and that's kind of what it felt like. It just kind of felt like this kind of release of like any kind of like need for effort and control, and everything became quieter and slower. And I just remember being aware that things were quieter and slower, and it was very juxtaposed to the kind of the manic crazy speed that my mind was often operating at, so much so that at night I would describe the experience of, I wouldn't even be having thoughts. It would just feel like my mind was buzzing like a broken fluorescent light bulb. And even when I closed my eyes, it still felt it still had light. It's like I closed my eyes and I would feel and see white light behind my eyes, and I would call those white nights, where I would just be so tired. I hadn't slept for days, but I'd still close my eyes and still see all this white light. So that happened at the VA, and I was like, well, shit, this is something else. And I was like, it's not weird or far out at all. It's just a matter of attention. It's like, geez, why didn't anybody tell me this? So I kept going back every Tuesday and Thursday morning, and that really had a massive impact, because now it was like, wait a minute, now I'm not my thoughts. So that means if I'm not my thoughts, then that means I have thoughts. So if I have thoughts as opposed to being my thoughts, then that means that there's some choice there. There's some agency. And that was eye-opening, because it never occurred to me that the running narrative in my head could be something that I could influence, slow down, or even turn off completely. I just assumed that was who I was. And so that was a major shift.
Very cool. So talking about that, how did that manifest into the Memorial Foundation then?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So the teacher's name was a woman named Karen, and she was teaching a style of mindfulness called I Rest Yoga Nidra, which is just a style of guided mindfulness meditation. And she was part of a larger organization, and they did certifications, et cetera, et cetera. So I started taking this course and at the VA, and she and I became friends. And then one day she says during the course, she's like, it's too bad I can't be in more places than once, because it would be so easy to give this guidance, because people just sit there and listen, right? So all you got to do is get her recording in front of people and get them to listen. And I was like, well, there's this new technology, and this is 2010 or 11, I'd say. There's this new technology called the QR code, which is those little squares that you scan with your phone. And I was like, there's this new technology called a QR code. So if you make a recording, I can connect it to a QR code, and any veteran with a smartphone can scan that QR code, and it'll pop up a recording, no sign in, no information, no nothing. It'll just pop right up, and you'll be able to be in front of as many people who scan the code. And she's like, really? I was like, yep, really, that'll work. So she and I developed a plan, and we got a little bit of funding, and so we created these postcards with hey veteran, how are you sleeping? Check out this mindful meditation, scientifically proven to help you sleep better. Scan the code for immediate access, something like that. So we made 10,000 of these, and we were initially encouraged by the VA that we could hand the cards out at the VA. Well, that unfortunately didn't work out. So we were left with all this product and nowhere to hand it out. And so this was around April. And so I was in DC at the time, and I said, I was thinking, well, I got all these cards to hand out, and I want to hand them out to veterans. What can I do? Well, I knew Rolling Thunder showed up every Memorial Day, and so I knew that was lots and lots of veterans that were going to be on the National Mall for Memorial Day, and this was 2013. And I was like, well, I'll just get some volunteers, and we'll go to the National Mall and just hand out these cards and say, try it out. And the cool part about the QR code is you can tell how many people scan it, and you can tell if they're listening to the content, et cetera, et cetera. So you get some good data. So we did just that. I got about 8 volunteers. We handed out all these cards, and waited about a week and a half, and then checked the data. And out of 10,000 cards we handed out, 1,000 people scanned the QR code, and out of 1,000 people that scanned the QR code, 100 opened the video, and out of that 100 that opened the video, 5 of them watched for longer than 2 minutes, something like, right? Sure. So we got some feedback, and it wasn't necessarily that great, and so we kind of went back to the drawing board. It's like, okay, so clearly there could be a better way to get the veteran community to engage with this content. So we started brainstorming. We're like, well, maybe we're attacking the wrong part of the veteran. What do you mean by that? Well, we were using science, right? And science is an intellectual thing, right? It's something that you've got to grasp intellectually. So we kind of mentioned we were targeting the warrior's head, their intellect. And so someone said in the meeting, well, what if we targeted the warrior's heart? And I was, what do you mean by that? Well, what are things that warriors already do that's heartfelt that connects to mindfulness? And since we had done Mindful Memorial Day, we're like, well, honoring the fallen is something that people connect to just right away. And it wouldn't be a bridge too far to say to somebody, hey, you want to honor a fallen warrior with mindfulness? Well, what does that mean? You say, well, we think when you honor a fallen warrior, you should do it with your undivided attention. And everyone kind of looked at each other like, I think any veteran would agree that that's the way you should honor a fallen warrior, with your undivided attention. And so the idea was, well, that's not a bridge too far. We think most veterans, most civilians who have ideas about veterans, we think everybody would find that to be pretty neutral and to make perfect sense. So that's when the idea of Mindful Memorial Day really took off from this kind of a fallback plan to a real plan. And so when we started moving in that direction, we didn't really know what was going to happen. We just knew that we wanted to honor the fallen in a mindful way, and that this was an opportunity to share the practice. And so we just started talking to people about wanting to do this. And what happened was what I call Uncanny Synchronicities. And this is part of a larger philosophy about how I do business. And so what happened was all these kind of pieces started falling into place. And so we talked to one person, like, oh, you got to talk to this person. So we talked to this person, like, oh, you know what you need to do? You need to go talk to these people at the Women's Memorial at Arlington National Cemetery. Can you do it on Friday? Okay. So we went to the Women's Memorial at Arlington National Cemetery, which is now called the Military Women's Memorial. And we talked to their executive board and their staff, and we said, look, we want to honor every fallen warrior who's died since 9/11. In 2013, 2014, that was 6,904. And they said, well, what do you think about hanging yellow ribbons from our rafters and hanging a yellow ribbon for every service member that's died? And I said, hadn't even considered that. That's a great idea. We'll do that. So they were like, okay. So then we put together the symbol, which is this symbol right here, which is the symbol that everyone's most familiar with, of course, is the fallen warrior symbol, which is the helmet, dog tag, rifle, and boots. And the symbol up the top, which is the incomplete circle, is a symbol that now people are more familiar with but weren't used to. That's a symbol for mindfulness. The two symbols together represent who we honor and how we do it. So we hung all these yellow ribbons from the rafters, and then on the back we put a little label or place for where you could put a name label, and then we had the QR code, which gave people a chance to connect to further mindfulness-based content around honoring the fallen. And so then, this is the very first year we put all the ribbons up. We got a lot of help, a lot of kind of serendipitous help that further made me kind of convinced that I was on the right track. And then when Memorial Day came around, we started handing out these ribbons in an exchange called a mindful moment of gratitude, where we would take the ribbon, we'd affix the name of the fallen warrior to a ribbon, and then hand it to someone and say, will you honor? We'd read the information, they'd say yes, and then you do this exchange. Give the person a ribbon to wear around their neck. And that first year, we honored 2,000 names, and the next year we honored 3,000, the next year we honored 5,000, and the next year we honored, I think it was 6,000, and then the past 2 years, the 2018 was the last, 2019 was the last in-person of Mindful Memorial Day. We honored every single name, all 100%. By then it was 7,000 or 6,984 names or something like that. And then this year, 2020, we did it all digitally. And by that we have the database, and we just reached out to the just American community and said, hey, would you like to help us honor these names? And thousands of people responded. And if you go to the Mindful Memorial Foundation Facebook page, you can see how we invited people to honor the names. And it just makes you so proud to be an American. You're just like, oh my gosh, we're so much more alike than we realize. This is just so great. And so that was during the pandemic. The Women's Memorial is still our greatest supporter. So we'll be back there again this year, whether we'll be there physically or not. It won't matter. We'll honor the names either way. But ultimately, that was how it came about. And the ultimate lesson that we learned was, if you really want to get kind of buy-in from the warrior community about something that might seem like it's not necessarily in their ballpark, just find the things that are connected through the heart. So the key piece here is I help the warrior identify from the heart first and let the intellect follow.
Sure. Did I see also, and maybe I'm wrong, but did you also go overseas as part of all this and do some training? Did you do any time, did you go to Japan or do any yoga training? Was that, or not yoga training, meditation schooling?
Well, I didn't do any training in Germany. So one of the things so the foundation honors the fallen. Armor Down teaches mindfulness. Okay. And so Armor Down teaches mindfulness and sells meditation cushions. And so what we've been able to do is, following this heart-focused path, we've been able to develop programs that make mindfulness immediately not woo-woo. So it's like anti-stigma mindfulness. And so our two main programs are called Armor Down, Daddy Up, which is all about helping dads be the dads they want to be, using mindfulness as a foundation. And then the other one is called Mindful Marksmanship, which is all about showing the warrior how their marksmanship skills that they've learned in the military predispose them to the basic foundations of a mindfulness practice. And all you've got to do is recognize those skill sets in the civilian context as opposed to the marksmanship context, and you're already ahead of the game. So we've been teaching that program to Wounded Warrior Project warriors in person for 2 years. But when the pandemic hit, they asked, could you do it virtually? And we were like, marksmanship program virtually. Let us think about that, and we'll get back to you. So we developed a program that uses marksmanship language as the foundation, but then uses our Armor Down meditation cushions as tools to mimic form and to mimic recoil. And so we developed some pretty kind of novel ways of sharing this through Zoom. And so last year, or in these past couple months, we've done 3 separate programs for Wounded Warrior Project in Germany, and we also did a program with Project Evolution, the Evolution Project, also in Germany. So we've done some work in Germany. So that's probably what you saw.
Oh, well, and I don't know if I said Germany, but I also meant Japan. Was there some actual connection, or did you guys go to Japan to do connect to do
Not
any?
so my relationship to Japan, independent of Armor Down, took place in 2010. And so part of a class I was taking at American University involved a trip to Japan and a class centering around the atomic bombs dropping at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So I got to go there on. I was there during August 6th, during the anniversary, and got to talk to the Hibakusha, who are the people, the survivors of that event. So we got to talk to some of them, and just see how the Japanese have evolved that place. And the last thing I'll say about my relationship to Japan is that I use a book written by a Japanese master named Morihito Ueshiba, who founded the martial art Aikido. That's a whole other story about how I got into Aikido, and happy to share it. It involves me getting my ass kicked after AIT. But anyway, he wrote this book called The Art of Peace, which is a real small book that's 114 stanzas long. So it's like made for Instagram. It's like there's 114 stanzas, and that's the whole book. And these stanzas all describe in ways that make a lot of sense how to be peaceful and powerful without being violent. And I've come to study that work as part of an annual. It used to be biannual, but now an annual practice of making the art of peace more accessible to the world. Everybody knows the art of war, which was written by a Chinese person named Sun Tzu thousands and thousands of years ago. I mean, if you go to Costco right now, you'll see like 5 different copies of the Art of War, like next to the toy books. I mean, everybody knows about the Art of War. Right. But you ask people about the Art of Peace, and they're like, "What's that?" So the Art of Peace was written in 1968, and so it's a compilation of this guy Osensei's famous statements, and basically what he saw in the 60s was kind of the real failure of just the use of violence to sustain peace. And everyone says, well, if you want peace, prepare for war. And there's some real flaws there, and there's a lot of arguments to be made that we've really, especially as an American society, we've really not done a good job maintaining either peace around the world or peace within our own warriors. And so there's a lot to be learned about how to do what we do in the context of violence better in the context of preserving peace.
Right. No, interesting, because I know that, and I forget the author. There was a book also called Zazen, and talking about the, meditation and the part about, just being, and of course, also, meditation archery and different, a lot of different ancient practices. So it's, it's interesting when you talk about marksmanship meditation in a sense, kind of a spin on or a take of that. So which is really interesting. And it's not the first time I've heard this, because I've heard other people talk about, in a sense, of different marksmanship poses or different, and it's really about body movement, right? Right? It's not about, if you take away the word marksmanship, it's really just body movement in a certain way and moving energy, directing it in a fashion, right?
Yeah, it's more a matter of attention, and so it's attention on your body and getting your body into a place where your body becomes essentially one with the instrument, whatever it is. And so what that means is that there's just the right amount of tension and there's just the right amount of ease, so that the body is not pushing or pulling, it's just stable. So that's the body. And then you've got the mind. So the mind has to be present focused, because the body and the mind are only distinguishable by language. Whatever we think or narrate in our heads shows up in our body, whether we're aware of it or not. So they're 100% interconnected. They can't exist without each other. We have to talk about it. So the way we use language is how we do that. So the way to think about what mindfulness is it's attention. It's the thing that is beyond your body. It's the thing that's beyond your mind. It's the thing, arguably, that is the last thing, maybe not the last thing, when you die. It's what we are if you follow a particular tradition. In my tradition, we're made in the image and likeness of the Creator. So attention is the ultimate variable. And so what mindfulness does is it teaches you from the perspective of the ultimate variable, and the practice is applying that ultimate variable within in any context. So so within the context of marksmanship, you're kind of creating this mind-body relationship to the weapon. In being a parent, you're paying attention to what's showing up in you as what's showing up in your kid and what to do about it. In the context of violence and conflict, it is, how do I stay, and this is a very important word, how do I stay empty? Meaning, how do I keep my attention without expectation, without worry, without fear, and just simply present inside this moment? And the reason why you do that is because what you've got inside your body and inside your nervous system, which is 13.5 billion years old, if you believe that kind of thing, what you've got is this incredible system that can be trained to respond at levels and sophistications that you can't think your way through. And anybody who's a warrior knows that when they've been in a combat or dynamic environment, they're not going, okay, now I need to walk over here. Now I need to walk over here. No, I need to do this. It's you flow into it. And when you get into the flow, the things that take place and things that happen are a little bit beyond what you can think. It's something that you become. And so when you practice mindfulness, you practice the thing that's the most important variable. And then when you take your mindfulness practice into meditation, which is seated, so meditation is really contemplative. So you can meditate on anything, but if it's just a meditation practice, you would sit on an armor down meditation cushion. You would first practice mindfulness to bring yourself out of narrative, out of paying attention to your body and all that other kind of stuff. Create a comfortable environment for your body. Tame your mind. The order is tame your mind, get comfortable in your body, engage with your central nervous system through your breath, and then move into a heart-centered relationship to all. And so if you're just seated in seated meditation, what the opportunity shows up is the opportunity to explore this idea that you're more than your mind and you're more than your body. And so in my tradition, which is the Catholic tradition, when I'm participating in that space, I'm as close to God as I can be. And I'm as close to what I recognize as me being a vehicle through which God to work his majesty. That's my tradition, right? Now,
It's
in the non-Catholic tradition, in other traditions, that can be looked at as totally different.
sure,
So, like in the Buddhist tradition, there's the everything that you see and everything you're aware of is an illusion, and there isn't anything out there but what you imagine there is. And so, what you come to realize in the Buddhist tradition is that once you study the layers, you see them all fall apart. You realize that there is nothing there to be worried about or fretful of, and you become enlightened. And so then you can move through that space. So there's lots and lots of ways to explore it. And when I teach completely neutral because I don't try to espouse any type of relationship to the beyond, but I do encourage people to have that kind of relationship, and specifically because of this year. Like this year is so full of the unknown that I think it's really important for people to develop a relationship to the unknown that has faith built into it, and a community that enables you to talk about this kind of stuff, because ultimately when it boils down to it, it's not up to you. And you've got to have some kind of relationship to that unknown, because if you don't, the darkness can get really, really, really dark.
interesting. I've heard the analogy given in the past of, praying is talking to God, meditation is listening to God. Would you find that's true in your I guess your experience? Would that be? And I know you said when you're in that state, when you're present, right? And where you say that you feel the closest
Mm-hmm.
um, to God. It's interesting, but you also talk about having some type of faith, and you encourage people because trying to stay, uh, you know, de, you know, denominationally neutral, saying it's not religion, where whatever your belief is. But what happen if there's somebody out there, Ben, that has maybe they're atheist?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that they don't believe in the Taoism or the Buddhism or the Catholicism. What happens if they don't have a faith?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think rationally you have to accept the notion that there is a quality to your human experience that is unknowable, and you still have to contend with it. Now you could say, well, science is how I contend with the
Sure.
unknown. But the challenge with science is that science is best understood as the understanding of repeatable phenomena. So when something is very scientifically sound, it's because it's now can be predicted by science.
Sure.
That does not overwhelm, or it does not supersede what is unknown. So even if you get to this scientific relationship, you still have to account for the unknown. So that's one thing that you've got to start with. There's no matter how smart or how far advanced science becomes, there is this aspect to the human experience that is unknown. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, when you participate with mindfulness, and I'm trying to follow I'm trying to reason out why faith is useful. When you study mindfulness, part of what mindfulness does is help quiet down all the things that comprise what it is to be human. So your thinking, the narrative, your identity, all the pieces that make being a human worth being a human, like the fact that you do have a past, you do have memories, you do have expectation. Um, Everything going on in your body is related to that. So your body is holding on to your thoughts and memories, not just as memories, but also sensations and holding patterns, et cetera, et cetera. So if you start to practice mindfulness and you get to a place where those things become kind of quiet, you begin to recognize that the notion of past and the notion of future is very much an intellectual thing. Okay, it's a very much an intellectual thing, and you can get that to where it's pretty quiet. And when you are, shooting a weapon, if you're shooting like a in a competition, or if you're shooting a sniper rifle at something really really far away, you have felt these moments of total quiet where everything is just quiet, everything's dialed in. You feel, you hear that blade of grass 5 feet away from you rustling against a twig, like you're just totally in the present moment. So that's there through mindfulness, and I think you can really experience that. So that really will give you a kind of a foundation of kind of the present moment. So what you've got now is, intellectually, you've got a practice that stabilizes your experience in the present moment, but you still have this space of the unknown. Okay? So ultimately, what you're left with in the context of mindfulness and meditation are these two spaces. Okay, there's the present moment, and then there's the beyond the present moment. So the question that you then have to ask yourself is, how do I engage with this unknown space? And you've got a couple options. The atheist option, I think, is absolutely a valid option, but I think it requires a level of bypass and kind of intellectual kind of hoops, jumping through hoops intellectually, to account for all the things that just by their very nature are beyond what your human mind can conceive of. To me, it's not intellectually, it's beyond the intellect to account for certain things that are embodied by beauty and awe and wonder and things like that. So I think it's one aspect of it. It's kind of hard to, that's just, it's just nature. You just look at the scientific phenomena. Okay. Well, then another thing I think is hard to account for is synchronicities, uncanny connections, things that just you never would have expected, just showing up out of nowhere and having meaning and significance. I think it's hard to just say, nah, that's just a coincidence. So I think that's another piece. And then the final thing, and this kind of comes back to the Mindful Memorial Foundation, I think it's hard to stay atheist in the context of interacting with people around the dead, because there are so many synchronicities that happen at Arlington over these past 8 years that are so awe-inspiring and wondrous, and they happen so frequently that we all the volunteers and leadership are all just kind of like, wow, that's a divine thing. We just have to be grateful. So I think it's very hard to manage those kinds of things. And then the final thing I'll say, and this is the part that's really a big deal, is when it comes to suffering, and one of the things that the Buddha said is very significant: suffering exists, meaning that no matter who you are, how powerful you are, how smart you are, suffering will show up and you will ultimately decay and die. So you have to account for that. And so in my mind, to account for suffering as just a standard phenomena that you just suffer, then you get old and die, it just does not seem very resilient. And so in the context of suffering and just looking at it from the perspective of the intellect, I think intellectually you can't help but end up in a place where you have to acknowledge that there's something beyond what you can be aware of and that you're connected to it. And the only reason that you're not aware that you're connected to it is mostly you're just connected to your intellect. And once you quiet your intellect down and connect to the heart, then God becomes pretty obvious.
Very well said. Very well said. Shifting gears a little bit. Talk about, you mentioned this before we went live. We're talking about and you mentioned it briefly, the armored down meditation cushions. Share with us a little bit what's going on with that when folks want to either donate or purchase one.
Yeah. So um, we started out with the meditation cushions as a way to support the honor brigade, which were groups of people. We called them the honor brigade. They would go from the military women's memorial into section 60 as big groups, to go and honor the fallen in section 60 with mindful moments of gratitude. So we we wanted, sitting on the ground is this is one thing, but we wanted to find a way to get people involved. So we created these meditation cushions. Here, I'll just grab one. We created these meditation cushions that, again, have the symbol on there and the QR code. But we created these meditation cushions and we gave them out to the Honor Brigade, and the Honor Brigade would go into Arlington and they would sign the names of the warriors that they would honor, and leave cool little quotes about those warriors, like thank you for your service, etc., etc. They'd leave dates, names, just to keep them alive inside the cushion, right? And then what a lot of people would do is they would give the cushion to the families of the fallen who were at the grave site, or they would take them home and give them to other veterans. But the idea was, again, heartfelt, creating these heartfelt things around these meditation cushions. So at first it just started as something that the foundation did. But then we realized that the cushions are really helpful in turning this idea of mindfulness into something a little bit more tangible. So again, talking about a cushion, whether or not you want to buy a cushion, is a little less of a leap than talking about whether or not you want to engage in a meditation practice. It's like a smaller first step. So we re-engineered the cushions, and we found a manufacturer that didn't get disrupted by COVID, which took a while. And now we've got these cushions that are being hand sewn in the mountains of North Carolina. And every time we sell a cushion, the person who purchases the cushion has an option to buy a second cushion. So for a third of the price. So we sell each cushion for $99, and if you buy that cushion, you'll have an add-on. Would you like to buy another cushion for $29? So if you bought your own self a cushion, you'd be prompted to spend an extra $30 to buy one for a veteran. And then we give those away to veterans for free. And then every time we sell a regular cushion, a portion of those proceeds go to giving meditation cushions away for free. And if you go onto our website, there's an application that veterans can fill out to get on the list for free meditation cushions. So, for example, we sold 2 cushions since yesterday. Both people bought the add-ons, and so the 2 top people on the list of the applications are about to get free meditation cushions. And the meditation cushion, of course, has a little QR code on it, and the QR code gives the owner exclusive access to special Armor Down content that no one else gets. So that's now part of our outreach, bringing the practice. And it's amazing how many veterans are out there that want to go and engage in these practices and want a meditation cushion. So it's been surprising how much the feeling and the understanding about what meditation is and why it's good for has changed. There's still some stigma around it, to be sure, but it's nothing like it used to be.
Right. So, Ben, if folks want to check out Armor Down and check out the meditation cushions, if they want to check out the Mindful Memorial Foundation, where do they do that? Yeah, so you just either go to armordown.com or mindfulmemorialfoundation.com, or excuse me, .org. That'll take you where you need to go. And just Google Armor Down. There's a lot. We've been at this for a while, and there's lots of content out there. I also encourage you, if you want to just see kind of how I teach mindfulness,
It's accessible to anyone who has access to Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So it's always free. Monday through Friday, I do it live at 0600. Not many people are up at 0600, but some people are. But it's recorded, so you can watch it anytime you like.
Nice, nice. Well, Ben, thanks so much for being our guest today on the Red, White, News Show. It's certainly an honor to connect to you, and and we'd be remiss if we didn't say thank you for your service, but more importantly, thank you what you continually do, serving others and promoting mindfulness and just really doing great things out there. So thank you so much.
Very welcome, Dean. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely.